Hello and welcome class, welcome students, loyal followers, and new people in the house. You are tuning in to a series on how to find the right home equity line of credit in the second position, and we're going state by state. Today we're looking at the state of South Carolina. And let me tell you, South Carolina came to play, came to compete. Now again, if this is your very first time watching this YouTube channel, you're actually in the right place. Very, very helpful for you. This series is part of what I call pregame work, which gets you prepared to do all the necessary groundwork, the foundational work, the mindset work, the logistical work of improving your personal finances. So I'm setting you up for success, removing mistakes, pitfalls that a lot of people make when they come across this particular strategy that my YouTube channel and a few others, only a handful of us still in 2025, there's still only a handful of educators that are helping people leverage debt accordingly, effectively, to eliminate other debts that are costing them high amounts in interest costs and high monthly payments. With this strategy that has a few different names for it, we can summarize it in the most popular term called velocity banking. That's not the name of a bank or an institution or the name of a product. It's just a process, it's a concept, it's an idea that has flourished over the last 2 decades, I would say. And we are now entering a season where this strategy is picking up a lot of steam again, where a lot of people are looking in this direction because we are in a declining interest rate environment and property values have skyrocketed over the last few years, which has created all this new money, this new equity that for the most part, for majority of Americans have no idea how to really use the equity in their home. Most people have equity. If you're a homeowner watching, most of you have equity in there, but it's sitting in jail. A famous YouTuber by the name of Garrett Gunderson often uses the term equity jail, where you've got all this money locked up doing nothing for you. You're staring at your home, but you're not able to really leverage and use that home to your advantage until now. You went on YouTube, you went down the rabbit hole, and somehow you found this 29-year-old kid talking about these different strategies, how you can leverage a home equity line of credit, credit cards, personal lines of credits, first lien, second lien, cash value life insurance, secured personal line of credit. And you discovered how you could leverage this equity at very low rates, competitive rates, compared to rates on your student loans, your car loans, maybe even your mortgage loan, credit cards for sure, personal loans, IRS debt, all kinds of high interest debts. That again is costing you a lot of money in interest daily, monthly, yearly, and high monthly payments. So what's happening is your cash flow is constricted. It's not as liquid. And with this strategy, it helps you not just eliminate the debt, but it helps you become a better borrower and retain your capital in the process for unexpected life events, circumstances. It ultimately helps you become a master over your finances in a society where borrowing is the norm. And so there's one school of thought to pay off your debt and avoid debt like the plague during that process. And there's another school of thought that says, hey, if I can understand debt, how it actually works on both sides of the equation, how can I increase my incentive to use this kind of debt to remove this inefficient debt, maximize cash flow, maximize results and returns, ultimately getting me to my goals faster. The number one ingredient to this strategy, again, when we summarize it, typically call it velocity banking. It has other terms to it: paycheck parking, mortgage acceleration, debt acceleration, accelerated strategies. Okay, has all these different terms to it. But the number one ingredient outside of the user having discipline, knowledge, financial literacy, cash flow, positive, all that stuff, putting the person, the individual, the user aside, just looking at the strategy itself, number one ingredient is the tool. What tool am I using to accomplish the job? If I have the wrong tool, even if the person has great financial discipline and knowledge of the strategy, but they use the wrong tool, it doesn't matter all this other stuff, because the math is just not going to reward you. You would have been better off not doing the strategy. Okay. So I often see people of high financial IQ and low financial IQ make the same mistake, getting the wrong product. I see it day in and day out. And despite being on YouTube now for 7 years, constantly, I've preached the message of doing the pregame work. I'm not someone that hypes this strategy up. I'm someone that just goes straight to the numbers, case study after case study, and always emphasizing on knowing your numbers, knowing where you stand, knowing your current position over and over and over again. I'm going to continue to do it because it still hasn't gotten through to the vast majority yet that do watch this channel. Okay. So this series is just adding, just on top of everything that's already been done. So with that, let's take it to the whiteboard. Again, we're looking at the state of South Carolina today. Action items are on the left-hand side of the board. This side of the board has remained the same regardless of what state I'm looking at, except for Texas. There was a few additions to the, not necessarily the action items, but just awareness. For example, the state of Texas requires when you draw money out of the line of credit, it always has to be a minimum of $4,000. Every other state, we're not going to have that issue. So that was like the only caveat, but all the action items have remained the same. I want to see your credit score at 720 or higher. I want to see you at a DTI of 30% or less. No more than 45% is the max. Once you get to the 40% and up range, you're just not going to get the best rate or the best product. And in some cases, you just flat out get denied. LTV options between 70 and 90% are typically where you're going to get the best deals. Although banks do go higher than 90%, up to as high as 100%, you're often not just going to get the best deal. Closing costs, I prefer to see zero or low, $500 or less. Anything above that starts to get a little expensive in my opinion. Intro rates, I like to see 6 to 12 months. That's the standard that we typically see. In this current environment, 2025, what we're seeing is intro rates as low as 1.99%. In some very rare cases, we've seen 0%, but only for like 3 months, 4 months. But right now, we're typically seeing 1.99 to 5.99 to about maybe 6.5, 7%. Intro rate 6 to 12 months, sometimes even longer. And more rare, you'll see 3 to 5 years. Okay. Interest rate calculation, I like to see prime or prime minus. As of 2025, in September, we are at a prime rate of 7.25%. Just you knowing that is going to save you thousands of dollars before you apply. Know where prime is. And that's going to help you target certain banks. Draw period is typically 10 years. The lowest is 5. The highest that I've seen is 20. Ultimately, you want to build a strong relationship with that bank in advance of applying. You want to make sure that that bank is mobile banking friendly, meaning that you set up a checking account and a HELOC at the same time, and they are linked to each other. You're able to transfer money instantaneously Monday through Sunday, any time of the day, no issue whatsoever. That's going to increase velocity. That's going to decrease the amount of daily interest you pay when you're able to immediately deposit your income right into the HELOC. Some banks make it more friendlier than others, so just keep that in mind. Lastly is payment calculation. It's got to be revolving. You have two options with HELOCs. It's either going to be an interest-only payment or principal and interest payment. More than often, you will see that the principal and interest payment option gets you the best prime rate and the best intro rate. Typically, you will see that. Some banks have no difference. Whether it's interest only or principal and interest, they give you the same deal. When we see that, you pick either interest only or principal and interest. There's no technical difference in the way the interest is being calculated. It's just that with principal and interest, it's encouraging the pay down of the line of credit. So then I typically, with my clients, encourage people to go with the principal and interest. Because for the vast majority of people, you're trying to pay off the debt. For the vast majority of people that are watching, trying to pay off debt. All right. Like I said earlier, South Carolina came to play. They came to compete. We like that. So I found you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 credit unions in the state of South Carolina, starting with Market USA Federal Credit Union, CPM Federal Credit Union, South State Bank, PARDA Credit Union, and All South Federal Credit Union. We got some really attractive numbers on the board here, as you can see. What we're going to do, these key details is what I was able to pull off of the website. That doesn't mean that this is truth, because this information might become irrelevant or invalid in 6 months. Or somebody watching this video 5 years from now, maybe this bank no longer competes. Maybe this bank no longer is even in existence, and maybe it got bought out by a different bank. What will remain relevant, evergreen, is the left-hand side of the board. Based on this information, we're trying to check as many boxes off as we can as we're doing our research. The banks that I have found is based off of my research. I'm always going to encourage you to do your research as well and see, especially if you live in this specific state, because of the way Google and IP addresses work, you're going to have more banks populate when you search what I search. In particular, I'm in a different state altogether, so I'm not going to see all of the banks potentially unless I'm in that area. Then more would pop up. So just keep that in mind. I want you to trust me, but verify the information. So as I go through these banks, I'm going to give my top picks. And even if I say, me personally, if I was living in the state of South Carolina, this is the bank that I would go with, that doesn't mean you go with that bank. That just means it, for me, has checked many of the boxes that I prefer. That's going to, yes, influence you to maybe go with that bank, but still you want to verify the information that it's actually accurate, because the details do change. So you want to make sure that the information applies to where you stand financially. And this is where the custom work comes into play. By no means is this easy. This is not simple, easy stuff, which is why coaching and accountability is so valuable. Whether you hire me or someone else in this particular space, I think it's worth thousands of dollars to invest in yourself in personal financial development. before you engage in a more advanced strategy such as this, because it would save you tens of thousands of dollars down the road, for sure. I've had people think they were doing the strategy and they were actually going in reverse, but they didn't see the math. They couldn't comprehend it. So how are they going to know what they don't know? That happens so often. So investing in coaching, couple $100 a month, or into a full coaching program where I have the ability to do this with you, hold your hand, walk with you side by side every step of the way. My goodness, the amount of money I save people outweighs what they invested in my coaching all day, every day. With that being said, let's now share my screen and we're going to go bank by bank, right? And read the details together and see what we find. Okay, there might even be times where I will see things that I might have missed. Okay, and like I said, those of you that are watching live, I want you to participate in the research. Comment if you find another bank, especially those that catch the recording. You can put in the comments below as well. So here we go. We have Market USA Federal Credit Union with their home equity line of credit. As you can see, 85% LTV. And one of my favorite attributes of a home equity line of credit is how the prime rate is determined, the interest rate calculation. So this is a prime minus 0.5%. That's awesome. In this environment, we would be at 6.75%. Now, they only go up to 200 grand in credit limit. There's no closing costs. Really like that. And the draw period is awesome. 20-year draw period. That's super cool. So understand, for 20 years, if you were to get approved for this, you're always going to be at a prime minus 0.5%. So when you apply and get approved for a HELOC, whatever your interest rate calculation is, that's fixed for the life of that product during the draw period, which is really cool. Even though the rate is variable, your interest rate calculation, prime minus 0.5, always stays the same. It's not subject to change once it's in place. Really, really cool. I love that. Mobile banking friendly. We like that. That's huge. Now, don't get confused. Whenever you see fixed home equity rates, that's not talking about the home equity line. When you don't see the line in there, that's how you know you're probably dealing with a home equity loan. So we come down and we see, okay, we have a home equity line of credit. Now, only caveat to this opportunity with this specific bank, as you can see, you have to do an initial advance of at least $20,000. So that what they're saying is your first chunk has to be $20,000. And the loan has to remain open for 36 months. That's usually not an issue. The only clarifying question I would ask with that bank is, hey, once I take the 20 grand out, do I have to owe that for any amount of time? Some banks will say yes. Some banks will say no. And if the banks that say yes, the workaround, let's take it to the whiteboard real quick. The workaround with that is we can, in that example, say you had to do an advance of 20K from the HELOC, and the bank says that you have to owe that for 36 months. The rebuttal back to them is say, okay, 20,000 is what I would have to owe, right? Can I pay back $19,999.99. And would I be in violation? Because I still technically have the original 20,000 outstanding. I haven't fully paid it off. So what the banks say is you have to take the 20K out and you have to owe for at least 36 months, but sometimes they don't specify the amount. So if they don't specify the amount owed, the workaround is, okay, never pay off the HELOC, but you could technically pay it down all the way to just a few dollars owed. I'm being real sarcastic with that number. We wouldn't do that, of course, but what we can do is every time the balance gets close to being paid off, we would not pay it off. We would just let that sit and do our next chunk toward our debt. You'll often hear me say in a lot of my case study videos that we don't have to wait to hit zero on the line of credit before you make your next chunk towards your next debt. When I say the word chunk, I'm referring to pretty much consolidating debt. You're taking another large lump sum transfer out of the HELOC, and you're going to pay off something with that money and recover the cash flow and interest from that transaction. All right, so that would be the workaround there if that's the case with Market USA Bank. So just keep that in mind. I saw that there was no closing costs, no annual fee, and there's no intro rate. Okay, and then we got that verified information again of the rate is prime minus 0.5%. The rate changes quarterly, which is cool. All right, so your rate's only going to change 4 times a year. So that does provide a little more consistency than a month to month. Closing costs are waived as long as you take that initial advance. And it says maintain our security interest in the security property for at least 36 months. It doesn't say anything about keeping $20,000 owed, but again, there might be some stipulation. That's what your part is to call that bank and find out. Next bank we have is CPM Federal Credit Union. Here we have another bank that says you can borrow up to 100% of your home value. We always want to be careful when read between the lines. Do I lose anything if I go for the full 100% LTV? Many cases you do. We'll find out in just a few minutes. Fast and easy access to your HELOC, so that is mobile banking friendly. That's a bit of a giveaway there. They have a lower interest rate. It says fixed rate offers as low as 7.24%. And then it says fixed and variable rate. We're mostly interested in variable rate options when it comes to second position HELOC, unless the rate that is fixed is below prime at least 2 percentage points, maybe a point and a half. If it's at 7.24, that's not attractive in a declining interest rate environment. So keep that in mind. If that number was 4% in a increasing interest rate environment, then the opposite would be true. That would be very attractive to lock in for 5 years. I had many clients in 2020, 2021, and I want to say early 22, right before rates started increasing really fast. People were locking in fixed rate HELOCs at 3 and 4% for 5 years tops, almost 5%, 5 years, 3 to 5 years. And they were able to avoid the high interest rate environment during those 5 years. Do you know how much money you saved if that was you? Because in those 5 years, did you have to buy a new car? Did you have to finance a new car for a family member or a child? Did you have to finance student loans? tuition payments? Did you have to finance a roof repair? Did you have to finance a new kitchen remodel, bathroom remodel, patio? Did you buy a new house? There's so many things that happen. And if you had a first or second lien HELOC with 200 grand, 300, 400, 500,000 locked in at 3, 4, 5% during 2022, 2023, 2024, oh my goodness, you were able to finance things at such lower cost compared to the market. So that's when a fixed rate offer is really awesome in a increasing interest rate environment. In a declining interest rate environment, why on earth would you want to stay at 7.24 for the next 5 years? That's not wise, especially if you are up to date or engaged with our political and governmental system that we have. You know, when we're operating under a Republican administration versus a Democratic administration, right? You want to look at history and you want to look at, yeah, do rates typically go up or do they go down when we're under a Democratic or under a Republican? And so you can compare and contrast, and that really helps us understand. Again, the trend is already in a declining interest rate environment. It's been like that now for a year, where rates have come down about 1.5 points. So with this, we've got a 1.99% for 6 months, and then prime minus 0.25. We like that. We like that a lot. 250,000 is the max. 10-year draw. Reduced closing costs. So average closing costs would be about less than $500. I'm cool with that. That's why that made it on the board. Notice how, in order to get those offers of prime minus 0.25, you need to have the 90% LTV. In order to get the discount for the 6 months at 1.99, you cannot exceed 90% LTV. So keep that in mind. Don't make that mistake. The banks are not going to educate you on this. They're going to ask you, how much do you want? And you say, whatever I get approved for, or give me the max. They're just going to listen to your commands for the most part. They're not going to educate you. So you've got to be educated before you walk in there, before you have that conversation. Very, very important. Got to be a member. Don't apply before becoming a member. So important. Okay. Notice how closing costs dramatically increase when you go for the 100% LTV. In most cases, we really don't need the max credit limit when we're doing debt acceleration. Often don't need to do that. Let's go to the next bank. South State Bank is a bank that we've covered in other videos. So often what you'll see is you have dedicated credit unions for each state. Then you have credit unions that'll cover 3, 5, maybe 10 states at a time. So South State is one of those banks that covers a multitude of states. Here we have 85% LTV, I believe 10-year draw period. Want to read this important information at the bottom. Minimum advance of 10,000. That's not crazy. Not upset about that. Low closing costs, if any. Right? Couple $100. Nothing too crazy. It says we pay some or all based on the option. Not available for promo rate. So they have a promo rate option. We come down here, 6.59%. for 12 months. Then it goes to prime of 7.25. So estimated closing costs, $339 to $6,000, which includes blah, 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 all this other stuff. So we want to keep that in mind. Typically, the bigger the bank, the higher the closing costs and fees that may be associated with it. But there are some cases where the closing cost does get waived. Okay. So again, like this is their marketing that you see. We've got the variable rate where the bank pays all the closing costs, but now you're at a prime plus 0.5. Or give me the 6.59 for 12, then it goes to prime, but you pay closing costs up front. The way we figure out yes or no is by running the math. The only way I'm going to be able to run the math with you is we do some coaching together. You send me all your numbers, and that gives me a really good idea of how I would proceed. But then again, I'm going to compare that to the other banks that I have on the board. And that's ultimately how we're going to narrow our options. Next bank we have is Parda Credit Union. Interesting bank. They've got this premier home equity line of credit, 95% LTV, no annual fees, no application, 15-year draw, take advances when needed. That's mobile banking friendly, no closing costs. Very attractive. Very attractive. We keep reading. Something that was interesting that we would have to call, get clarity on. They've got this plus or minus a margin, but they don't disclose what that minus is. But I can tell you, the next sentence gives it away. What? Approvals based on your credit worthiness, the combined loan to value, and your ability to repay. The margin remains in effect for the life of the loan. So more than likely, I could take a strong guess and say you need to have a credit score probably 720 or higher, LTV probably 80% or less, in order to get that offer. Very, very important. So there's also this promotional rate that they have. So introductory rate, margin, or offer may change or be discounted at any time. That's for people reading and inquiring about the HELOC. That's not for people who already have it. Once you already have it, it's locked in. The sentence before told us that. Very, very important. Looks like they might cover some closing costs as well. So, very attractive bank. Overall, I like the draw period length. I like the LTV amount. No annual fees. And we've got that promo, 4.99 for 6 months. And then it says as low as prime of 7.25. So even if it's just prime 7.25, I like that. I'm not upset about it. But the following sentence does say plus or minus a margin. So if I'm looking at this bank, I want to know what that minus is. So I'm going to call them, ask them, hey, what's the minus? What's the max that you go on the minus margin prime rate? And what does one need to have in advance to qualify for that? Super important. Outside of market, CPM, South State, part of the bank, we're left with All South Federal Credit Union. Last bank I found, that had another interesting home equity line of credit, second position. As you can see, rates lowest 6.25% for a limited time, no closing costs. 85% LTV. That's cool. We like that. And if we keep reading, always go to these little paragraphs here. Always gives more context. Closing costs may vary. Closing costs could include, not limited to, right? Blah, blah, blah. They're available in South Carolina. It's cool. We like that. Focus on the home equity line of credit sentence. We skip over home equity loan. So it says, based on the prime rate, margin of, now here is very interesting. You got to pay attention to this little sign right here. It says plus a margin of minus 1% to 2.5% based on credit worthiness and lien position. So whenever I see that minus, the way that I'm interpreting that is the rate could be as low as prime minus 1% to prime plus 2.5% is how I'm interpreting that. Because why would they put that minus there? And did they forget to do, or did they put a minus when they met a plus? I don't know. But the reason why I believe that is referring to a prime minus 1% is because of what they're displaying up here. It says rates as low as 6.25. So that's a point below prime. Let me tell you, if you find a bank today in 2025 where the rate is prime minus 1 point, most of the time I'm jumping on that over an intro rate offer, over a higher LTV, over a longer draw period. Like I'm often leaning more toward that because that's one of the most valuable things for me when it comes to a home equity line of credit. Is there a prime minus margin? I really enjoy that because I think more long term. It might cost me a little bit more up front to not have an intro rate of 4.99 or 1.99 or anything obviously below 6.25. But if you tell me, hey, this doesn't cost anything to get this product and we'll give you a prime minus 1%, All South may get my business. So that's huge. Let's see if there was anything else on here that we might have missed. We need excellent borrower credit history. Excellent typically means over 720 or higher, probably 740, maybe more. And it says, and is only applicable if the home equity line of credit is in the first lien position on your primary residence. That is also interesting. So this offer of prime minus 1% might only apply to those that get a first lien HELOC. Or HELOC is an interest-only HELOC during draw period payment, blah, blah, blah. Yep. So keep that in mind. This product, that low rate, 6.25, might only apply to those that get a first position home equity line of credit. The only question that we have to find out would be, well, how big of a credit line can I get? And if you're telling me no closing costs on a first lien HELOC, that's pretty attractive because most first lien HELOCs do have closing costs, and it can be quite expensive in some cases, depending on what state we live in. So all South sounded great, but as we kept reading, it doesn't apply in this series of focusing on second lien HELOCs. It's mostly for the first, but still good to know. Now here are some other honorable mentions that didn't make it to the board. I'll tell you why. All right. But still an honorable mention in terms of like other options, other banks. As I said earlier, South Carolina did come to play. So we have this other bank called South Carolina Federal Credit Union. Only reason why I didn't make it to the board was not a whole lot of information. Got this one sentence here. Home equity loan in line. So it's like we don't even know what this thing offers. They don't even show the rates for their HELOCs, right? If we go to mortgages, they just don't show it. So we don't know. This could be an awesome bank, but they don't display it. Sometimes we'll see that. Gotta call, find out details. Got another bank here called Sharon View Federal Credit Union. No annual fee. Max credit line $350K. 15-year draw, no annual fees. Low closing costs. Prime plus 0.25%. That's the only reason why I didn't make it on the board. It's Prime Plus. Every other product I have here on the board, for the most part, is Prime Minus. And some cases have a intro rate on top of that. But still, honorable mention, Sharon View, Federal Credit Union. Next, we got SCU, South Carolina State Credit Union. They got an interesting thing going on here. It says, open a new HELOC or increase the limit on your existing HELOC in conjunction with a new checking or money management account. You'll be closing costs for a limited time on their home equity line of credit. We have an intro rate of 4.5% for 1 year. And let's see what other information we can find. Prime rate is 7.25%, but look what they did to us. They put all those carrots in front of us, but then hid the fact that we're dealing with a prime plus 1%. So the lowest rate you'll be at is 8.25%. 4.5% for 12 months is not bad. The $1,000 potentially I can make, cool. What else we got here? See what other information I can pull. I think that was all they gave me on their site. And then we got the 85% LTV. And I think no annual fees. That's what it's showing here. No annual fee. And that's about it. So I want to get more info to, find out more, but didn't make it on the board because of that prime plus 1%. But still worthy mention. Next is Greenville Federal Credit Union. Honorable mention, 80% LTV, 7.5%. So it's only a prime plus 2.5. It's not the end of the world. Wouldn't be totally upset if I got this, but I would be upset if I got this, knowing that the banks I have on the board are clearly better. But if none of those banks on the board existed. Now I'm looking at a bank like this. And again, South Carolina is a competitive state when it comes to their home equity lines of credits. The banks are competing for business, which is why we don't want to just go with any bank. We want to go with the one that's giving the most amount of incentives and checks the most amount of boxes. Very, very important. But that was like all the information I could pull off their site. It wasn't as clear. We got another bank, Family Trust Federal Credit Union, same thing, prime plus 0.25, 720 or higher, 80% LTV. They do have a promo of 4.49% until March of 2026. So if you were to get the HELOC in October, it would be October, November, December, January, February, so 6 months. Okay, so 4.49 for 6 months, let's say, during the promo period. And then you're at prime plus 0.25%. Not a terrible bank, but again, didn't make it on the board because my other banks were beating it. Last bank I found was Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union. It says rates as low as 6.25%. This has the potential to make it on the whiteboard. Only reason why I didn't put it on there is they're just not clear on the information. APR is based on the prime rate plus a margin of up to 4%. So notice how the language on this site said the APR would be based on the prime rate plus a margin. If we go back to PARDA, look at their language. Plus or minus a margin. We scroll down. They say it again. Plus or minus a margin. So the way they use language is very, very important. We keep reading. Credit subject to approval. Present prime rate 7.25. Don't exceed 90% LTV. Okay, in order to get that. So it's just not clear, but honorable mention. Because if, like I said, if you can get me a second lien HELOC with a prime minus 1%, just like All South was doing, but it's explicitly stated for their first lien HELOCs only, this was not explicit. It did not give additional information. So we just don't know. And like, that's it. The site is not as user friendly. And those are all the banks I was able to find. Let's see. Top picks now. Out of these 5 banks, top picks. Tough, tough, tough. Well, All South, we have to X them out because it's only for the first lien HELOC product, not the second lien. With PARDA, we don't know what that prime minus is, but I really like the other features as well. No annual fee, no closing costs, for intro rate, 6 months, 15-year draw, 95% LTV, mobile banking front, like all that stuff is good. If I can just find out what that prime minus is, that's more than likely jumping in my top picks. Okay? So we have PARDA, CPM, and Market USA all having a prime minus option. Just based off the information that we have, it looks like Market USA has the lowest prime minus option. So for me, I'm looking at Market USA / Prada. If the prime is 0.5%. If the prime is minus 2.5, then Prada would fall off and get replaced with CPM because CPM has a better intro rate, 1.99 for 6 months as opposed to 4.99, and it's a prime minus 0.25, 90% LTV, some closing costs, $250,000 credit limit. I don't know if there's an annual fee or not, 10-year draw, but that 1.99 is pretty attractive. It will make up for my closing costs, more than make up for it compared to the 4.99. So CPM could potentially replace Prada. If the prime minus is 0.5, all day, those two would be the top picks. And number 2 would be South State. It's a bigger bank, but I do like the 6.59 for 12 months. Then it just goes to prime, 7.25. No closing costs, mobile banking friendly, $250,000 credit limit. Not too upset with that. But like I said, Market USA and Prada or CPM, those are my top banks that I would do business with. If these 3 don't exist, then it's South State for me. Okay? Now, I saw a mention of Fifth Third Bank or Regions, might be others to consider for South Carolina, but the problem is those banks are much bigger. So let's do Clarity. So if we look at Regions Bank, do they offer a home equity line of credit? That's what you need to verify first. I know that they do because I've had people use them before. So we got home equity. So they're doing a 4.99 for 6 months, and then look what it goes to, 8%, as being the lowest rate. So it can't make it on the whiteboard, right? Typically, why is that? These bigger banks cannot afford to give us a prime minus. They have high costs. They have high leverage, high overage. They're covering multiple states, multiple demographics, multiple different areas throughout the United States. It doesn't make sense for them to offer that. When they get that kind of big, they don't need to offer. They don't need our business when you get that big. So that's things to keep in mind why Regions would not be an attractive bank. Now, granted, it's an honorable mention. No closing costs. Okay. 4.99 is cool for 6 months. But I just have a problem with being at a prime plus 0.75%. It's nearly a point above prime. Really not attractive. Okay. The other bank was Fifth Third Bank. Same thing. Home equity. Fifth Third Equity Flex Line. 10-year draw, no closing costs. So we know it's prime, but we don't know if it's a prime plus. See if we can find any other details. Okay. Minimum 750. That's a high requirement. Minimum 750. 70% LTV. They do have this 0.25% discount. They go pretty high, 500,000, 10-year draw. APRs are indexed to the prime. 7.25, ranging from prime minus 0.53% to prime plus 8%. Okay. That's the highest max credit line I've ever seen on a home equity line of credit. But here's the thing. It's not every day we see a bigger bank kind of competing. So again, you know me, what attracts me often is the prime minus. So in order to get this prime minus, they're probably, I wonder if they're including that 0.25% discount. If not, that's prime minus 0.78%. Like almost a point. That's really, really cool. Looks like they do have an annual fee, $65. That's not crazy. I'm not upset about that. If you have perfect credit, 750 or higher, and you do 70% LTV, then Fifth Third Bank is definitely an honorable mention here and could even go on the whiteboard. We could even put it on the whiteboard. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because I'm not even upset about that. Despite it being a bigger bank. So I know Fifth Third is in Florida. Now here's the thing. Fifth Third Bank, let me see if they cover South Carolina. I don't know if they cover you guys. So let me just, I know they cover Florida. Fifth Third Bank, does it cover South Carolina? Fifth Third Bank does operate in South Carolina. Okay, that's good. It's good to know. Cool. So Fifth Third, 500K, credit limit max, 70% LTV. I know they're mobile banking friendly because I actually used to bank with Fifth Third, so I know it's mobile banking friendly. Prime minus 0.53%, 0.25% auto pay discount. Very competitive. And we got 10-year draw. 10-year draw. What else? What else? What else am I missing? Was there an intro rate on here? I don't think there was. No intro rate, but again, not a big deal when the prime rate is so low. So no intro rate, and it said no closing costs. You probably have to keep it under a certain credit limit amount. And you need a 750 credit score. So this is for someone that's got, like, you're teed up perfectly. You've done all the pregame work. You're setting yourself up real nice. Fifth Third Bank came in swinging at the end there with some really good incentives. But again, trust, but verify this information. If everything is correct with Fifth Third for the state of South Carolina, then that immediately jumps into the top 1 position over CPM, because CPM was only prime minus 0.25%, despite having the 1.99 for 6 months, and could potentially be competing with Market and Parta, because Market, we know for sure, is prime minus 0.5% with a 20-year draw, 85% LTV. So what would make Market more attractive than Fifth Third is the LTV and the draw period. That would make it more attractive, and no annual fee. Over Fifth Third, 70% LTV, so there's less equity to work with. You would have to really have a good amount of equity in that home. And it does have an annual fee of $65. So, not too crazy, but again, pretty competitive for a big bank. I often avoid big banks because they often don't have the best deals. But here we go, Fifth Third is competing. And I would say one of those reasons, again, when you're in a declining interest rate environment, competition is opening up right now. Lending is opening up. We're coming out of a season where property values have increased dramatically in the last few years. And now there's all this untapped equity. So banks are going to do everything in their power to take that equity in the form of debt back to the customer. As good stewards of our money on this channel and good borrowers that are educating ourselves, we're going to take advantage of those incentives, but not become slaves to those institutions. We're going to use that debt wisely, eliminate this higher interest debt over here, recapture that cash flow, and get on with creating financial freedom in your life, independence, never being reliant on having to borrow, but understanding when the opportunity is there, sure, we'll use it, but we're never going to be dependent on these banks and institutions. You're eventually going to learn how to build your own banking system, tax-free, protected, fully liquid, and you're going to eventually create cash flow where you don't have to borrow from the banks, and you just stay in the credit card world where you're leveraging for points, cash back, things like that. With that being said, I'm gonna let you go for today. Let's continue on with this series on how to find the right home equity line of credit in the second position in your state. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll be talking soon. Bye now.